Today, I want to talk about a specific skill that dramatically increases relational capacity, especially for people who quickly think and decide. Many intuitive judging types in particular pride themselves on foresight and clarity. You often know where things are going before others do, and that ability serves you in work and strategy and leadership, but in intimate relationships, that same speed can create distance. So, if you're someone who mentally moves fast, who sees patterns quickly, who tends to jump to conclusions because your pattern recognition is so strong, this is for you. You are not reacting to what your partner did, you are reacting to what you decided it means. This is the March video in our Relational Intelligence series. The workbook link is in the description, and you can catch up on previous months in the channel. Let me introduce you to a simple model for understanding this meaning-making jump. It's called the ladder of inference. At the bottom of the ladder is observable data, something concrete that happened, for example, a text that wasn't answered, a tone that shifted, or a plan that changed. From there, your mind selects certain details and ignores others. Then you add meaning, then you form assumptions, and then you draw conclusions, and then you act from those conclusions as though they are fact. And all of this can happen in milliseconds. The missed text becomes, why are they ignoring me? Which then turns into, maybe I did something wrong. And that becomes, I am not important to them. And then that becomes, this relationship is one-sided. And by the time you speak with your partner again, you are responding from a fully formed narrative that they might have no idea about. Maybe they just didn't text you back because they were in a meeting, right? So relational intelligence means learning to slow down that climb up the ladder. It means pausing and asking two grounding questions. What actually happened, and what am I making this mean? That pause alone creates space between stimulus and interpretation, and that is the space where choice lives. So here's what I invite you to try. The next time you notice yourself jumping to a negative conclusion, write down 2 columns. In the first one, list only the observable facts. What would a camera have recorded in the room? And in the other, write the story you are telling yourself about those facts. Everything your mind has added. And then ask, is there another way to see this? Maybe a more generous way. To invite you to stretch a little further if you want, is what if you deliberately practiced an immediate, or immediate as possible, positive reframe? Not a naive one, like not denial, but just a generous one. Instead of thinking they don't care, what if you think they are preoccupied, they are busy? Instead of I am not valued, what if they feel secure enough not to over-explain, and I'll get the full story later. You're not abandoning your discernment, you are widening the interpretive field. For fast minds, this is actually the harder discipline. It requires admitting that your first conclusion is not always the only true one or even the best one. So even a small shift in language there can be progress when you go from this means you don't care to I notice I'm making this mean that you don't care, right? And that brings a little separation in there. Also, similarly to what I've mentioned about parts work, instead of saying I am angry, saying a part of me is angry, right? So there's some noticing and awareness happening. Now, I also would like to go maybe one level deeper because there is something important underneath the speed of negative interpretation that I have recently become more aware of. So research by Scissors and Gergel from 2016 has shown that people with lower self-esteem consistently interpret their partner's IMs, so text messages, communications, more negatively. And then they are likely to act from that interpretation in ways that create the very distance they were trying to avoid. I'm going to be mentioning a couple more papers, and you'll find the links in the descriptions. On the other side, couples who lean towards generous interpretations of each other show more trust, more satisfaction, and less conflict over time. In other words, the generous reading is actually not naive, but can become predictive. So some evidence suggests that low self-esteem causes people to perceive more conflict in relationships. And then another 2021 study suggests that the relationships also or that also runs in the other direction. When you perceive your relationship as conflictual, your self-esteem will drop over time as a result. And finally, Robinson and Cameron studied over 500 dating couples to understand how self-esteem works, not just inside the person, but between two people in relationship. And as expected, people with lower self-esteem reported being less satisfied and less committed to their relationships, but their partners also reported lower satisfaction and commitment. This paper also describes a shared resource model where self-esteem functions less like a personal trait and more like a joint bank account. The more self-worth the couple has between them, regardless of how it's distributed, the better the relationships seem to fare. So two people with moderate self-esteem can be very happy and do very well together. In short, how you feel about yourself is not just your business. It is a relational resource that you are either contributing to or drawing from every single day. So tending to your own self-regard is one of the most loving things you can also do for your partner. Now, I want to be very careful here because this can sound like this is your fault, fix your low self-esteem and stop damaging your relationship. That's not what I'm saying, right? That's not what this is. Low self-esteem or low self-regard or self-doubt, it doesn't appear from nowhere. It is almost always the residue of experiences that you did not choose. These are messages that you received before you were old enough to question them, or environments where your nervous system learned that ambiguity was dangerous and that assuming the worst was safer than being caught off guard by disappointment. So you did not build this architecture, it was built around you, right? It's not your fault if you have low self-esteem. And also, once you can see the pattern, you have something you didn't have before. You have awareness, and awareness is where agency begins. And I'm not talking about the agency to simply decide to feel differently, because that's not how this works, but the agency to choose a different response, to pause, to name what is happening, to offer yourself a little grace before the old tapes just automatically take over. And in that way, to stop outsourcing your happiness to someone else. When you treat yourself with compassion, when you soften that internal narrative that defaults to the worst usually, you build steadiness. And from that steadiness, it becomes genuinely easier to extend the benefit of the doubt to your partner. So the next time you feel that rush of certainty, pause at the bottom of the ladder. Name the facts, and then name the story, and offer yourself kindness and compassion. And then you can choose whether you want to respond from fear or from generosity. And that is where your relational capacity is going to expand. And if you want to explore this live, or if you have any questions, I would love for you to join me on the 17th of this month for our live office hours. We will work through exactly this kind of thing together in real time with your real situations. The link to register is below. I hope to see you there.